join me in welcoming Marissa Epstein.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to say thank you to Anna and her team and Liliana and all the amazing volunteers. This is just a tremendous day. I feel like it's been a long time coming. It's also not very often that I walk onto campus and see so many people in red shirts who I feel friendly towards. So I'm glad no one here is from Oklahoma. No, all jokes aside, I went to undergrad here at UT. It's a wonderful opportunity to be back, but I hold Stanford near and dear to my heart. I met my husband there. And then dragged him back to Texas as soon as I could. But which is ironic because I think we spend more time with our GSB and Stanford classmates here in Austin than we do with native Texans. So I feel like this is really good company. So Anna and team, thank you so much for bringing us all together, and thank you especially for having me. It's truly a privilege to be with you all. So. So I teach nutrition in a variety of mediums here at the university, from hundreds of freshman students who come into my classroom with extra large Coca-Colas to graduate students like Liliana who are considering pursuing a career in the ever-evolving health and wellness landscape. I started teaching at the GSB almost 10 years ago, and every year in my research I measure the attitudes of American adults towards health behaviors. We do 1,000 in-depth interviews every year, and from that we cull insights that is, as a professor of practice, I then turn into policy recommendations or innovation ideation for commercialization in the private sector. And as Liliana mentioned, I also work on the investing and startup side, where we see exciting ideas with product market fit based on what we know Americans are ready for as consumers with health aspirations. So all of this work led me to family dinner, believe it or not, the most boring topic ever. So I'm going to try to really engage you on this today. It has been a surprising life hack indeed, based on our research. But it wouldn't really become interesting to me as a topic until I became a parent. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and when I first got pregnant, I was so excited as a longtime practicing pediatric dietitian to have family dinner. I thought it was going to be something like this. It turns out feeding your kids is more like this, and it actually feels a depth of emotion akin to this. Terrible. But despite the fact that I've been studying this topic for over a decade, and always looking for ways to help people eat well and meet their aspirations, my high hopes were sort of devastated. I grew up in a family here in Texas where food was love and eating together was quite sacred. And I wanted that tradition with my own children. This included a variety of foods, rich in nutrition, of course, vegetables, fruits, until one day my son, my eldest, started rejecting foods. And as I saw him enter preschool and start going to birthday parties and even innocently enter the playground, it turns out that the external environment started to become more influential. And slowly but surely, I started to worry, and he actually got pickier. As it turns out, my son is not unique. Only 1 in 5 preschoolers in America eat a vegetable per day. So picky eating concerns and malnutrition concerns are all too valid, and they're all too common. This may be shocking, but what's even more shocking is what their parents do. Only 1 in 10 adults meet their daily recommended intake for fruits and vegetables, which is just 2.5 per day. And of course, we see consumption disparities among minority groups. Consumption is lower among men, young adults, adults in greater in poverty, and varies dramatically by state. And then, of course, with the largest disparities in meeting the recommended intake for fruit, especially, and vegetables by poverty status. Now, the irony to this is that America finds picky eating quite acceptable for someone like my son. So based on age, what we know is that Americans' acceptability of picky eating, or the preference of a child's preference to avoid healthy foods, changes over the lifespan. So for children under 7, about 3/4 of us think it's totally fine. As children get older, that number goes down slightly. About 1 in 2 of us think that it's okay for teenagers to be picky. By the time they reach young adulthood, that number's dropped a little bit again. And then adults 25 and up, the majority of us think maybe you should go ahead and accept that lettuce is a vegetable that should be part of your diet. When I talk to parents who are very, very concerned about whether their children will end up ever eating vegetables, I say, no, you do have one saving grace. After they leave your house and when they start to date, it will be very important that they start eating more foods than just mac and cheese. Based on our data, we find it less acceptable that single adults in particular are picky. So, and if any of you have mid-20-year-olds who are looking to hook up, this is some data you need. So I get often asked, when did this start? What is picky eating? When is this normal? Well, it actually became a quite singular trend starting in the 50s and 60s, at the same time that manufacturing and processed foods came to market. This coincided with overeating among children, and it was really when we started to see for the first time that dietary intake was increasing, primarily because of snacking. So in the early 1900s, we know that children did not snack. It was not culturally normal. It's not part of their daily schedule. And it would have been mostly untenable from an economic perspective to have extra food for children to eat at will between meals. But by 2006, we know that children had increased their calories to almost 200 per day because of snacking, the caloric intake from which had nearly doubled over the past 4 decades. So some of you may remember the book Green Eggs and Ham. This came out in 1960 as a commentary on this issue, and of course it's a classic. I still read it to my children, and they still don't eat eggs or ham. So, shockingly, 60% of American parents say that they have at least one child who is a picky eater. And so for the parents who participate in our research, many of them tell us that it feels completely inescapable. But what I find quite provocative is that picky eating might just be inescapably American. So when you ask American adults how common is picky eating, 84% of us say that it's common here, but when you compare that to adults worldwide, only 36% say that it's common. So what can we learn from other food cultures and from maybe minority food cultures that are not well represented in America's food culture? This is really the heart of my current research. It's an important problem to solve, and I promise everything gets happier after this slide, but I think sometimes when I talk, people can kind of glaze over on this topic because it's about kids and it's about food, and aren't there more important problems to solve? And I want to compel you that this might be the most important problem to solve, which is getting children off to a great start early in life so that they become food resilient over the course of adulthood. Picky eating starts as early as infancy, so as many as 1 in 3 parents of kids under 18 months struggle with this at home. So I gave you the global statistics, but the prevalence of picky eating does result in detrimental growth for children. Lower nutrition status, lower physical activity, less positive development physiologically over time. And at this point, we now have research that shows that a set-in period happens around 4 years old, where some of these behaviors become semi-fixed and less reversible if they haven't been addressed by then. Of course, you know that low intake of fruits and vegetables increases your risk of chronic disease. For children, this is associated with low academic achievement. And nutrient deficiencies, which we think of as both undernutrition, so not getting enough vitamins and minerals, even if you may get enough caloric intake, or overweight and obesity, you may get more than enough caloric intake, but still not the right calories from enough nutrients themselves, are now the largest contributor to life years lost at a global scale. And now inversely, children who eat enough fruits and vegetables do have a lower risk of obesity and obesity-related disease, and they're more likely to eat healthfully for life. This becomes a growing concern as kind of the picky eating early years shift into early elementary and adolescence. So right now in America, obesity affects 20% of children and adolescents, and of course, as you would expect, unfortunately, disproportionate prevalence among minority populations. And unfortunately, obesity does predict high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, and breathing problems like asthma and sleep apnea, and joint problems. Now, at the same time, America is also struggling with body dysmorphia and fat phobia, and we're seeing disordered eating behaviors on the rise. So sadly, girls in 1st through 3rd grades, about half of them say they want to be thinner. And by 10 years old, 81% of children are afraid of being fat. Nearly half of 9 through 11-year-olds are sometimes or very often on diets. So this is crushing from a mental health perspective, what it is we're facing when it comes to the future for our children and the foundational relationship to food that our culture is building. So we're justifiably worried, I would argue, about what our kids eat and how they relate to food. But in the process of worrying about my own children's nutrition, I actually nearly lost a complete love of cooking. I think actually this is quite common among parents when you start to try to feed several Godzillas at the table. You might as well just put it in a dog bowl and leave it on the floor and let it go. But there was a deep mental struggle for me to even enjoy family meal times. It became increasingly stressful. And I found myself asking, how did something so elemental, so human as eating together become so hard? So the study that we just completed, actually today I'm so excited because this will be the first time that I share results on the work that we've been doing. But we did a study on this very topic. When we asked parents of preschool children, what comes to mind when you think of dinner as a family, we heard 2 types of responses. The first was fell into this category of connection. We heard words like love, family time, and then the second category was the feelings surrounding the experience, like chaos and inconsistency and deeply frustrating. And when we asked parents why are mealtimes frustrating, they told us that they felt resentful that their kids weren't eating what they cooked and frustrated that they couldn't afford to waste food. They felt inadequate. I'm not a great cook. It's a reminder that I need to be a better parent. And finally, they told us they felt scared. What if my kids never learn to eat healthfully? Tremendously, this act of eating actually taps into a tremendously deep well of emotions that are core to how American adults think about parenting. When we asked kids, however, what do they think of when they think about dinner? They said it's when I get to see mom and dad, or I get to talk about my day, or our family is together. Now, interestingly, not once has an adult or a child mentioned an actual food. So what we're learning is that eating together isn't really about the eating part, it's about the together part. So how do we keep nutrition on the menu without sacrificing that connection? Our research points to an ordinary yet elegant answer in family-style meals. Sitting together at a table, sharing the same foods. This is an ancient but perhaps overlooked method in today's modern society. It's shockingly powerful. By becoming less prescriptive, family-style meals encourage children to cultivate their own relationship to food as they're ready and able within an environment of support and safety. What are the effects of family meals? Well, we already know, and it's been long known, that eating together as a family is beneficial. You see improved overall family functioning, increased vegetable consumption. Children are more likely to have a positive body image, less likely to have disordered eating behaviors. But family-style meals are much less researched to date, but especially effective. Kids who eat family-style show higher levels of intuitive eating, less overconsumption, more new foods tried. They're eager to accept foods they have never seen before. By adolescence, these children demonstrate healthier diets overall and fewer weight concerns. And in my current study, we've observed that parents who serve dinner family style report being happier and less frustrated at mealtime. So how does this work? Well, there's been great work done on a concept called the caregiver stress paradox. This is a pattern in which the caregiver attempts to influence the child's eating. But tell me if this sounds familiar. Just try this broccoli, it's good for you. But the child responds undesirably, doesn't eat the broccoli. Now this is very stressful for the caregiver, who then tries harder to influence the child. You have to finish your food, or just one bite, or my favorite, the reward. You can get ice cream if you eat your veggies. Now, these might work at first, but over time, the child actually becomes pickier. Their exploration of new foods decreases, and they eat the healthy foods less often on their own. Now, some children stop eating entirely, which can actually be a physiological response to the stress of the caregiver. When any of us sense an external stressor, our bodies go into fight or flight mode, and our brains downregulate our digestive system. Now, this is a critical physiological response for your body. You can't be hungry at the same time you're like fighting off a tiger. So your body shuts it down, and in a child, this presents as a lack of hunger, which of course frustrates the caregiver. So to focus on managing that antagonist, our bodies hide any appetite signals. And so when children feel coerced to eat, this happens. So in our research, we're now starting to think about if our focus on healthy eating as parents feels like control or pressure to the child, we might actually be sabotaging their ability to eat successfully and nourish themselves. Children, we know, need to feel safe and need to feel relaxed to eat. So we asked our parents to do a family-style dining protocol. We worked with the laboratory school. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's the research-based preschool on the other side of campus, where the caregivers not only educate children in the preschool setting, but they also conduct research in early childhood development. It's absolutely best in class, and we had the wonderful opportunity to partner with them on this pilot study. So I want you to imagine what we asked our parents to do. Number one step, turn off the TV. Number two, invite everybody to help set the table, share plates for food, so larger family-style portions, all set at the table with proper utensils for everyone to be able to help themselves as they're able. Ensure that there's a comfortable seat for everybody present. Don't sit at the bar top. Enjoy, a table where you can see each other's faces. And we start eating. Maybe we bump elbows. Maybe we help little ones serve themselves. But importantly, we enjoy as much as we'd like of whatever's been prepared with no commentary. And hopefully we connect. And after we finish, we clean up together. So what's different about this than maybe how my meals have been going different? Well, we're playing a team sport in this scenario. We're helping each other before, during, and after mealtime. It's a gratifying communal experience where children have a role that fosters a sense of ownership and really builds their internal motivation to participate in the family structure. We're also building trust. This meal might include food that you've never seen, but it also might include food that you want to eat too as a parent. And modeling is the most instrumental tool we have for interesting children in eating new foods. Evolutionarily, it's very important for children to see adults physically put the food in front of them inside of their mouth. They know it's not going to poison them, and that in the forest, as you're foraging mushrooms or whatever, that's a good one to eat, and that it's not going to kill them. So it's very normal for children to wait to see that everyone else is eating what's been presented to them. And then with that, we create this environment that's highly curated where the children operate with freedom and choice. I tell my parents all the time, the best way to have children make great choices is to give them great options. So within this environment of options that you feel great about, your child is always going to end up making a good choice. But most importantly, it's one that they're excited about making for themselves. So we set up the food, prepare them for success, but they're responsible for choosing. And we're comfortable with them eating everything that's offered. So children, the parents of our preschoolers conducted this protocol through the fall semester, and they were also given the opportunity to participate in any one of the following educational opportunities. One was reading our children's book about mealtime. One was attending a parent workshop, not similar to the conversation we're having here. Another was a one-on-one consultation with a family dietitian. And then finally, along with the protocol, we gave every participant a mealtime toolkit for children. And this included child-sized plates, cutlery, a glass cup, and a placemat. And importantly, the cutlery was stainless steel. The plate was white, I'm going to say bone china, but it wasn't fancy. It just looks more like an adult restaurant-sized plate. And one of our hypotheses was, might children's dinnerware, if it looks like adult dinnerware, elevate the child's sense of invitation at the table? Is there an effect when you give kids colorful plates that have separated sections and primary colors and animal figures on them? Does it give them a sense that that they have a different role at the table and a different expectation than the adults do, who are eating off of regular stainless steel and probably mostly white plates? I'm not going to dive into that, but it did turn out that the tools dramatically increased the children's effectiveness with dietary intake. What we found overall, excitingly, and these are just the top line, we're still getting into the very, very rich data, is that with just one family style experience per week, parent frustration decreased, mealtime anxiety decreased, satisfaction with their partner increased. And with just one family style meal per week, children's problematic behaviors decreased. Picky eating, leaving the table, food refusal, etc. This is a very, very exciting direct dosage effect, and the first time we've seen this in the literature. And so what we are now thinking through is, what does consistency look like over time, and what are the effects long term of just a single opportunity for a family to eat together with this sort of autonomous ability for food selection, or opportunity for food selection. And I couldn't help but coming back to the practical wisdom that Aristotle talks about. That practical wisdom itself may be kind of loosely akin to modern day common sense, is something that can't be acquired solely by learning general rules. So many of us know the rules of nutrition. We know what's healthy. We know what you should eat or what you shouldn't eat. But Aristotle says that you must also acquire through practice those deliberative, emotional, and social skills that enable us to put our general understanding of well-being into practice in ways that are suitable to each occasion. We are designing our next study to try to unpack what this general understanding in practice looks like for children. How do you give children the skills to then not just eat for themselves in a safe environment at home, but practically navigate a very complex food environment that's external? And so that we feel like is really akin to riding a bike. If you read your kid 20 books about riding a bike, how it works, the rules of the road, the path, the techniques, they'd still fall off the first time no matter what they know in their head, right? And so if our expectation is then after much practice, they learn to ride, that we know over time that they learn to navigate good decisions while on the road, then you know and trust that your child's going to be a great and safe and self-protective, self-aware biker. So that's where we're headed next. Thank you so much for your time. I'll just close by saying that family style meals, we are delighted to know, is a very powerful intervention for families struggling to bring nutrition into the home in a consistent way. It's also an opportunity to practice eating, where we can acquire practical wisdom, and where our children can acquire the tools they need to navigate a lifetime of healthy eating. So instead of healthy or unhealthy or good or bad for you or black and white rules, children come to see that a meal can include all kinds of foods, and that eating different foods for different reasons is appropriate to celebrate, to have energy, to heal. But ultimately, it's one very powerful method of designing for nourishment of the whole person. And in doing so, we believe that it solves for nutrition. So I think now I'll take questions, and thank you very much.
Anyone have a question?
Some of it.
That sounds great. The one thing where that's a huge problem, however, is the nutritional awareness of parents, the stresses of daily life in terms of getting a meal on the table at all. And the amount, are there efforts or programs to try and educate parents in terms of eat themselves, let alone feeding their families?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll comment first on I'll say yes, there are many nutrition education programs for parents. But let me comment on the premise, which I think is the more complex observation you're making. American adults in our data have a distribution of attitudes towards healthy eating. And it's very important, I think, for us to acknowledge the segmentation there and come to appreciate how those attitudes come to be, and then how those attitudes pair with ability. And by ability, I don't mean personal self-efficacy. I mean capability and opportunity in the environments in which they exist. So about 20% of Americans have a near fixed mindset that healthy eating is not important to them. This group is largely immovable from an attitudinal perspective. It would take quite tremendous and very in-depth therapeutic interventions to help them change their minds. The three most powerful ways to change the mind of that person is that they have a near-death experience that's health-related, or someone they love has it, that they have, that they move in with a partner or roommate, or they get married who has different food behaviors than they do, or third, they have a child, and then suddenly they wake up to a different way of thinking about eating. The other end of the extreme on the distribution curve are your super users. The Whole Foods shopper who has limitless capability to provide for themselves highly nutritious food, and to also waste that food. And that person needs no convincing, right? But they can be influential to other Americans who are less capable but maybe aspirational. And they can also be highly antagonistic to this group over here. And we see this in politics too, when food kind of gets into the political arena. Whether it's the two examples that we actually have studied responses to were when Nancy Pelosi back like 10 years ago brought homemade chocolate chip cookies to a public elementary school. And we surveyed Americans for their responses for that. And one group was like 100% all about it, and the other group was like, what on earth? Very, very interesting. So, and then in the middle, you have this rest of the distribution that kind of, there's not a fair way. There's three distinct groups in the middle that want to be healthy. So the aspiration exists in varying degrees, but the modality by which they can meet their health aspiration is quite different. You have a group that wants the magic bullet, just very quick and easy. You have a group that is more willing to consider lifestyle changes, but they're busier and they're lower income and less economically capable. And then you have a group that are striving. They're in this constant range of motion, always trying to get there and feeling that what they're capable of doing still falls short of what they'd like to be doing. Now, some of the most compelling research came out of one of my postdocs at Stanford when she was looking at this group of individuals who were part of the striving population. And she focused on single moms in the Bay Area, and she did 36 in-depth ethnographic interviews trying to understand the lives. She lived with some of these women, just watching what are the circumstances by which a woman wants to be healthier and wants to feed her children better but doesn't. And her findings are quite provocative. She found that moms were very aware of what was healthy. And so this counters much of our notion that education is the answer. Moms know that vegetables are healthier than a McDonald's Happy Meal. And that should arrest us all for any of us who are sitting kind of in a seat of near condescension, thinking, oh, if they just knew better, then these people would eat. And that is quite a popular attitude that we see a lot in our data. She also found that despite this knowledge, single moms who had at least one job or providing for more than one child elected a McDonald's Happy Meal over asking their children to eat vegetables. This was a very conscious decision that they made as parents. And thirdly, the reason for that was because over and over, they face a variety of very challenging decisions for how to spend limited economic resources. And they would rather keep their apartments heated and the electricity on and have kids have a pair of shoes to go to school than they would chance cooking an expensive healthy meal that their child may or may not eat. And then uniquely, at the end of the day, they didn't regret that decision with any self-loathing, because they knew that of all of the no's they have to tell their children throughout the day, this was a 99-cent yes they could give their kid. And frankly, it kind of started, I found this beautiful, beautiful data. And frankly, it was also really powerful to see these stories come to life and create an empathy, and also shine light on the gap in a lot of the research approaches into not the nutritional education status of parents, but the economic mobility that parents may or may not have. So is our nutrition knowledge and behavior deficit in America really a result of education and teaching, or is it more a result of having populations that do not have upward mobility and the opportunity for nutrition to become not just more affordable, but less sacrificing in their current family status? So that got us really interested in childcare and in the attitudes of working parents, and actually led to a lot of this work. So I hope that answers your question.
So with the family meal setup, is it critical to have the dishes at the table so that the kids can like get seconds of like what they like or something? Or do you think you'd have similar or weaker effects if everybody gets their own plate buffet style before we sit down at the table, which would inhibit like getting up for seconds if they like something? I mean, because at my house, we have family dinner every night, but my table is too small to actually, right? So I will portion a protein, a vegetable, and maybe a second vegetable or a starch onto everybody's plate. And I have an idea of how much my kids can eat, and then we sit down and they eat it all. But sometimes it takes them like 2 hours to finish their plate. And I'm curious if I made them make their own plate, or if I put the stuff on the table, would that expedite this process?
Yeah, I know. Oh God. the definition of a family style meal is that the individual plates themselves. So if you have and we had many families who did buffet style, but everyone goes to the buffet, and they may need your help if you have small kids, right, actually putting food on their plate, but they get to decide how much of everything. And then seconds is a really great opportunity for consideration of others and introducing that concept into the family structure, whereby if someone wants seconds, they're prompted to seek out whether others at the table would also like seconds, and is there enough for everyone who wants seconds to also get seconds? And then they're, kind of wants that check that box, like, yes, everyone, it's okay for me to go get seconds because everyone else is either disinterested, or I'll make sure I leave enough for the people who are interested in seconds of that particular food. Then they go and they can serve themselves again. Now, it does mean, so I think you have to kind of decide. Do you want to get up more often to go back to the buffet to help someone who might need physical help getting more food? Or do you want to sit there for 2 hours? I think that's like maybe sometimes you're like, no, I want to do this in 15 minutes. I can't stand looking at you all for longer than that. And maybe other times you're like, no, I haven't seen you because and I feel guilty and I'm going to sit here for 2 hours with you. I'm joking, but either way, it is, by definition, the effect came about by children being able to plate themselves only if they were physically capable. And even when they weren't physically capable, still dictating to the helper, I'd like this much, or no, that's too much. And then being allowed to have seconds if appropriate for everybody else.
So Christine somewhat covered my question, but so I think I was fortunate to grow up with every meal was family style, just as you described it. So
Should we clap for your mom?
She was amazing, but so I actually can't visualize what a non-family meal is. So could you share a few examples of things that would not be family meals?
I would love to. Anytime you go out to eat, right? Everybody's picking their own dish from a menu. We have many. This is a phenomenon we're watching right now, where it's called the short order cook phenomenon for short. We would never put that in the research, but it's where parents ask the children, "What do you want to eat?" and then they make individual meals for everyone at home. So someone wants mac and cheese, someone else wants chicken, someone else, and they assemble it. So it looks family style, but it has not been designed as family style or presented as such, and the children are not encouraged or expected to consider all of the foods at the table. And really it kind of mirrors the restaurant model, the current hospitality norm for a menu of sorts where everyone chooses what they want.
Thank you, super helpful. Could you comment about nutrition and breakfast? Like how you start the day? Because I would love to do that too, but 2 hours is also what we take in the morning for breakfast.
Yeah, no.
I was wondering.
I hide in the bathroom with my coffee first. You can't do family style long, elegant 2-hour dinners for multiple times a day. Multiple times a week is pushing it, as we all know. So for breakfast, and some of our families actually decided to do their family style protocol at breakfast. They felt that was the easiest time to do it, or like on a weekend morning. And breakfast takes the shape of many different things. So, it can be easy because typically breakfast foods don't require a tremendous cooking lift to do family style in the morning. Maybe you have, we have families have yogurt, a bowl of granola, a bowl of berries. Other families, scrambled eggs, toast, kind of more American, and then and everything in between. We had families do like a frittata bake, single pan, one skillet, throw everything in there. This is what you're being offered. It's family style. So I think it's kind of whatever works for you. Other families are like, there's no way we can sit down at breakfast. Breakfast is my kids wake up just in time to barely put their clothes on before they go to school, and sometimes they don't even do that. So it's, breakfast is a to-go moment. And so then maybe, and that's fine, that's great. My kids make their own breakfast. As I said, I'm absent, I'm upstairs, I'm in the bathroom for a long time. And what we do is have, low accessible foods that the children can serve themselves, like granola or cereal or toast and peanut butter. They know how to kind of assemble. Well, they've been expected because they're survivalists and they know mom's not going to help. So I think it's kind of whatever works. But the fact that this takes we were just blown away, completely blown away to see a clear dosage indication in the study that just one time per week of an intentional moment and shared menu, you could see the effects too. So yeah, breakfast, no right or wrong, no right or wrong.
I'm curious about, you mentioned the problem of snacking, and how does the excess snacking factor into what you share with your parents?
It is a key ingredient to a successful family meal. If your kids don't come to the table with an appetite, there's a low likelihood that they're going to participate. So we did encourage parents to consider limiting snacking to 2 hours before the meal was served. And they were able to find great success there. It was a change for many families. It was another surprise to see how often children snack, whether offered or just have access to snacks. But that was a very positive one from all the families. They were very happy to have an indication of how to limit snacking that had such a positive result.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
When you say you saw a benefit, what kind of benefit did you see? Was it like 20%, 50%, in like either the number of kids' willingness to eat vegetables, or how much? And then how young was like the youngest kid in the study?
The benefit occurred in 100% of the families who tried fine family style dining for the first time.
And that might be extremity, was it? They just started eating a bunch of vegetables, all of them? Or was it like...
No, the significance score, it was statistically significant. So we saw, based on what they indicated was the baseline for the child, the benefit occurred. Yeah. And then the age group, so the enrollment criteria was that they had at least one child enrolled in the preschool program, so that's ages 3 to 5. And then many of the families, of course, had additional children. As young as 6 months, I think, was the youngest sibling. And then as old as 8 years old was the oldest sibling. So a wide range of children ages. Yeah. Great question, thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Marissa.
you. Thank you.